All right, everybody, welcome back to the Built on Bitcoin podcast. This is my first debate, so this will be interesting. We'll see how this goes. We're talking about Lightning, and we have a couple OGs in the house. We got Harsha Goli, who is trained as an engineer, did a bunch of Lightning stuff at Fold, at Swan, a couple others names you've known. Traded that hat in for a CEO and doing a bunch of boring compliance stuff at a company called Magnolia. And then we got Paul Stork, also OG, started writing about Bitcoin stuff in 2014, I think, Paul, with truthcoin.info,
Right.
and a creator of BIP 300 and 301, also known as Drive Chains. And yeah, so we got a debate on where does Lightning stand today? Is it a failure in 2025? And we got a few points to kind of hit on. And we got Harsha taking the affirmative, Paul taking the negative. So we got the basics out of the way. Let's just jump right in. And maybe you, Harsha, could start with just like a 2-3 minute opening on how do you view Lightning today?
Yeah, I mean, Lightning's doing great, we've gotten it implemented at a lot of exchanges, a lot of huge direct to like retail, like customer facing, platforms have kind of exploded with usage. I think like the big, like headliners, right, is that Lightning over at Cash App is like taking up 25% of the total like crypto volume compared to Bitcoin, right? And that's like obviously massive. Right now, people have started releasing like if you have like a massive, Bitcoin node on Lightning, you're probably getting between 9 and 10% yield. And this isn't just like if you're super well connected, like Boz, which I think he gets like something even more ridiculous. But like if your blocks like Lightning routing node, or if your Amboss is Lightning routing node, you get like, a pretty significant amount of revenue, which is awesome. I think Lightning's in a pretty good spot. From a technical point of view, it's probably in the best spot it'll ever get, right? There are some like optimizations we can make, but all the tech pretty much exists already for the best case, like a consumer wallets out there. So you can have a unified balance, which has always been the holy grail in Lightning Land, between like your on-chain and your Lightning balance. So you can receive via, Lightning or receive via on-chain Bitcoin, have it be in one unified balance and send the exact same way without making any sacrifice when it comes to custody. Pretty big deal. But yeah, Lightning's in a pretty good spot, and I think specifically really interested to like chat with Paul about this because well, there's a lot like I think Paul is not the most pro Lightning person, but there's also like a lot of thoughts in regards to there's a cult that ensures Lightning's dominance, and I want to talk more about the cult in particular because like man, to be frank, I shit on Lightning all the time. Like I'm ready to. It's been my space for like a long time. So I wanna, as someone who's, I guess, in the cult, assuming Paul, am I in the cult? I'd love to hear that.
I don't know, but maybe if you're willing to defend Lightning in 2025, you probably are.
So I'm probably, I mean, like, listen. I've worked at Lightning Labs. I've like worked on Lightning Protocol
Yeah.
like a lot. Like, I'm probably in the cult here. I shit on Lightning all the time though, and I'm happy to
In
like
my
talk about all the
experience, the
cult.
engineers who work on Lightning are not in the cult. Like Taj Dryja
Okay.
is not in the cult at
Yeah.
all, right? Taj Dryja is
Yeah.
not in the cult. I don't really think Matt Corallo is in the cult. I don't think, like all the if you're brought up on stage to defend Lightning at a Bitcoin conference, you're usually not in the cult. Even like, someone like John Seth going on stage and saying, "We know about the problems in Lightning. They are voluminous." Not in the cult. So I think there's a huge difference between the engineers who work on Lightning every day and like the fan club on Twitter who are in the cult and people who are far removed. If Michael Saylor goes on CNBC and he says like a bullshit line, he clearly has no idea what he's talking about. Bitcoin is great. And then he says, and all this other stuff will be on Lightning and on these other layer 3 protocols, which is a real quote from him. This is just, Madison Avenue salesmanship, and this is not serious. The words don't actually mean anything. So that's great. I mean, hey, maybe that's a great idea, but
now this is perfect. This is a perfect jumping off point for point number one. But first, before we get into rebuttals, Paul, give your kind of opening statements on how you view Lightning right now.
It's very difficult, but I'm going to try to give the audience some idea where I'm coming from. And I'm going to try not to repeat too much of what I said with Alex Gladstein. But yeah, in 2015, I heard about the Lightning Network. I thought it was really big. Everyone was talking about it both positively and negatively. There was a whole debate about it back then. But there was this YouTube video describing what Lightning was from Joseph Poon and Taj Dryja, the inventors, and it only ever had like 300 views, like over a year. So not a lot of people were actually watching this was the first sign of trouble. And then I wrote some Lightning tech. I did this peer-to-peer Oracle thing back in the day, and I wanted to see if you could do hive mind on it, which presented like a unique challenge. You want to do Lightning with this thing. So I actually wrote a spec and some diagrams and technology involved using a Lightning network on that. I think that was in 2016, a long time ago. So I was originally very excited about Lightning. I thought doing SegWit and Lightning was a better idea than doing Drive Chain back in 2015, 2016. I don't feel that way now. This is interesting because Drive Chain was invented in 2015, right before Scaling 2. It was in November 2015. So I knew a lot about both. And over time, I've learned more about both. And now I have flipped my opinion. And then over time, it's just become more and more clear that the people who love Lightning know the least about it, which is part of my point about the cult. And I guess the only real way to give people some idea of what I'm talking about is there used to be this company called Theranos that was a scam blood company, but it was really, really big. It had like this famous female founder. There's a Netflix documentary about it that's really good that I highly recommend. It had like all these people, like generals were on like Henry Kissinger was like on the board, and there was like photos with presidents and stuff. So it was incredibly prestigious and it was worth a lot of money. And of course, from the outside, it looked great. And from the marketing department side, it looked great. But then the actual engineers working on the technology kind of knew it didn't work. One of them actually took his own life. He was a Stanford professor who quit Stanford to work for this biotech startup. And he couldn't live with the lack of integrity, and he killed himself. And then there are other people. This is a fantastic story that everyone should look into. But basically, they would do demonstrations where they'd bring people in and have them prick their finger with the blood and put in this little machine, their blood in this little machine. And then they would give them a tour of the facility. And while they were giving them a tour, they'd have people from Theranos come in, take out the blood from the Theranos machine, do blood tests on older traditional machines that had nothing to do with the technology they were working on, the pre-existing Siemens machines. And then they would come back and present as if this had been done by their own Theranos technology. So for example, when someone does a Noster does a zap and they click a lightning icon, that is fraud in a way, because it's very likely that people are using a custodial app like Primal or something. And if it's custodial to custodial, then 0 Lightning transactions have actually taken place and 0 Bitcoin transactions have taken place, especially if it's the same custodian. So this whole thing so when I hear stories about people say, oh, Lightning is great, and my friend used Lightning last week, I don't know if they really used the real Lightning network or if they were just a gullible person who fell for the fraud and fell for the demonstration of the machine. So that's just where I'm coming from, and that's why I'm totally unfazed. In 2025, I just think, well, maybe this is one of your later questions, like what would it take to change your mind? You can imagine, like in the Theranos point of view, you would want to see some kind of accountability for this mass lying that had been going on, some kind of separation in the app of like, this is custodial, this is really using the Lightning Network, this is really not. We are not going to bundle these things together anymore. Or at least if we are going to do custodial, we're going to like explain that you are not using the Bitcoin network. You do not own any Bitcoin. You do not have not your keys, not your coins. You are not using. Every custodial Lightning is someone who is not using Lightning. So
Okay,
if that were made clear, then I would be. But now I don't even know. When someone says I use Lightning, I just freely assume that they are just being tricked, and I don't, so I don't believe them. Even though they say I have direct firsthand experience with Lightning, I know that many of them really do not. So it's just a tragedy that they think that they are having a great time on Lightning, and that does nothing to change the fundamental issues with it being unable to reach 8 billion people. So I'm sorry that went on for like over 2 minutes, but
the comparison, and Theranos really was like a pretty big deal for a lot of reasons, right?
Yeah.
But the comparison between like Theranos and like how people implement Lightning is a bit disingenuous, right? Because like, in those like meetings with investors where it was quite literally like, this isn't like the crypto usage of fraud. It was like actual financial fraud, right? Like investor fraud is what happened with Theranos. They would literally say it did one thing and then go backstage and then have it all be done manually. This is like the worst case scenario version of fraud. But like in the Lightning case, specifically with the example of Nostr, that's not really fraud. I do hear the frustration, right? Of like people feel like they're using Lightning, but there's real reasons why various different like, apps like Primal or whatever have I think more of a self-custodial like take on this, right? Like, are you familiar with Stacker News?
With sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Stacker News. It's like
The
a
Stacker News, yes,
like a
yeah.
yeah. It's like a forum website that uses like Lightning and kind of like this Noster like Zap idea, but it's more based on Reddit. Really, is what it is,
Yeah, when
or
I
like
was
I
on it,
guess
I checked it out once or
Y
twice, and I thought
Combinator.
it was pretty cool, but I haven't really been
It's
back.
pretty cool. Yeah. It's a little bit, I think, a little bit,
Network
tiny bit
effects
downhill.
are tough. Network effects are really difficult.
They are. They actually, I think, hit like started really running into like usage problems after they rolled out a completely self-custodial model for their Lightning zapping stuff, right? So like
See, there
now
you
when you
go.
get on there, yeah, and so like
That-
and because part of the problem
That's my
is,
point. Yeah.
yeah, well, it's not. I think the highlight, from a product standpoint, what actually happened is there's like this new friction point, right? Like this, it's not really Lightning makes the whole thing bad. It's now in order for someone to use this website, where basically before you just go in, you log in with your Twitter like profile. Now I have to like get my wallet, somehow attach my wallet to this setup, my wallet, which is typically on my phone. Now this is like a huge friction point. As someone who's used Lightning since the beginning, this was like kind of annoying to me, and I had to like
Yeah.
figure out how to like close the little like window because I don't want to deal with this, right? And
Right.
frankly, like I just
Annoying to
didn't
me
care
also.
about the yeah. I didn't care about the self-custodial aspect. I just didn't. I want to get on there and make my comments. But that's not really like fraud when it comes to the usage of Lightning. This is just like one company's specific approach to how they brought self-custodial Lightning to their website. And Primal went about it a different way. Primal went about it sounds like, where if you go from Primal user to Primal user post or whatever interactions, it just does that in-house because that's just way easier, way simpler. And I bet the Primal team doesn't have the like the infrastructure or the team like in place to get like self-custodial zapping going. I'm not really a big Nostra user. I don't know if you guys can tell, but
Sure, but the thing is, this is in the Theranos documentary.
I'm specifically pointing out the parallel to Theranos being a little disingenuous, just so it's clear.
Yeah, I don't think that it is that disingenuous. I mean, of course, no analogy is perfect, and I'm just trying to give people more of a first approximation of like where I'm coming from. But the Theranos people really thought, fake it till you make it, and they thought, sure, it doesn't work now, but right around the corner, we're going to get it to work, or many of them did. And that is what people think with Lightning. Also, they just think once we get timeout trees, once we get CTV, once we switch from HTLCs to PTLCs, once we do this, once we have op expire, they just think it's right around the corner. And I don't think the Theranos people are quite. I think it was a huge fraud, but I don't think it was the worst fraud ever. And this is again in the documentary, which is like you need an delusionally optimistic person to be an entrepreneur, to be a scientist, or to be anyone who wants to change things, an artist, a musician, a performer. So you need delusionally optimistic people in the world, and that's in a way a good thing. So I actually kind of think Theranos. I'm trying to say Theranos wasn't so bad, and I'm saying Lightning's not so good, and I'm saying they kind of overlap a little bit. And
Yeah.
so this is just a reality of trying to change the world, that it's very difficult, and that you are tempted to, for the good of the troops, say one little white lie after another. And then after 10 years, it adds up to a massive delusion.
Let me
Yeah.
jump in for a sec, because I see both sides. Because there's definitely the people who think that you'll be able to buy coffee on Lightning self-custodially, and it's going to be super easy. And I think that's for anybody who has a brand that's pretty much dead. Or there's friction, like you said. And I've had that same experience with Stacker News, where it's like this was easy, now it's not easy, and I'm not using Stacker News because of it. It's interesting that you mentioned, Paul, that people who are more technical are not in the cult, which to me speaks to if you understand the hurdles, you're more clear-eyed. So I guess the question might be how technically feasible are overcoming the hurdles? And I think, Harsha, you said at the outset that when it comes to the technical side, we push it about as far as we can go. So it's kind of like, how fundamentally broken do we think Lightning is to be able to scale to the masses? How far along are we? Because then that can kind of hopefully illuminate the people who still think that you'll be able to, buy burgers and whatever on the Lightning self-custodially.
So I want to ask one question for Paul on this like topic. I think that'll help like frame the conversation going forward. What is Lightning's big problem currently? What is the big issue currently with Lightning? Just so everyone's on the same page.
Well, I think it has quite a few problems, but one for me is that you need layer 1 bytes in order to join, and also you need, in order for it to remain secure, you need a very credible option. You need a very credible ability to access L1 bytes. But there's not enough L1 bytes for 8 billion people. That's the whole reason we're doing the whole scaling and layers thing. So it's just kind of a flat contradiction to me. And then the fact that that's what required to onboard people and keep their usage in the non-custodial safe zone. As a result, it's misleading when people say, "Oh, I joined the Lightning Network and I've been using my channel for a year and it's been working great for me." Because that's not the point. That's already expected. The problem is that we can't have 8 billion people do that. So I think the L2s, they will have their own network effects, and people are going to want to use some L2 that like their friends are on, their trading partners are on, and they are not going to want to use one that only less than 1% of the Earth's population can use, like in a given year, which would be the Lightning Network. I really think, truthfully, though, I do think the bigger problem is the cult itself, that it's now impossible to criticize Lightning, and it is impossible. Anyone who tries to tell the truth about the Lightning Network is actually sort of shamed and tried to dealt with it in an aggressive way. To me, this is all just further proof that it does not actually have the will to succeed. It is defensive and shallow.
Well, it sounds like if they're like the cult, right, which we have, seems to defend it pretty well. It sounds like there's a lot of people behind this technology, one way or another,
Right.
that allows it to have some level of staying power, right? I guess like just to point that out for just a second, which is valuable when it comes to like surviving, because really like for any product, really what you have to do is you have to survive as long as it takes until you get your golden moment. That's when you thrive. It's really just like surviving as long as possible up until a luck moment. Investors call this the hockey stick, thing, right? It just flat,
Yeah.
flat, flat, and then shoots up.
Right. But hasn't it been 10 years though?
It's been like 7, not even, right? Like beta, but like we left beta in like what, 2018, 2019, something like that,
The
right?
original idea was from 2015, and maybe the network effects are a prison and also a kind of life support. We want
what does
creative
success look like?
destruction also. Many different ideas have had to take.
And is success like onboarding the world
Yeah,
in
yes.
particular?
Yeah, it is.
So, okay, onboarding the world. And so, maybe shrinking down that goal, right? Before we onboard the world is we onboard a significant portion of folks in general, right?
Right, yeah. You can't do that
Like
either.
whatever that looks like. So, yeah, call it 100 million, right? Which, yeah, it's probably, I think that someone's on the math on this, I don't have it in front of me, but going to be very taxing on the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin hasn't scaled to this amount either at all, right? And I don't think Lightning is a deep peg from Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin hasn't scaled to this amount, then Lightning surely isn't. So I think like for this conversation, it's not Lightning has failed to onboard the masses. It is Bitcoin has failed to entice the masses. I think that's a fair categorization, correct?
Well, I would say that they are far more interrelated than that. Frequently, when the price of Bitcoin goes up and it seems like we have a new wave, like a new era, a new all-time high, and then you get new people. This has happened to me many times in my life as a Bitcoiner. The price will go up, and then all kinds of friends will message you and say, they'll send you a text and they'll say, hey, you're into Bitcoin. The ideal thing would be able to send them like $5 or $10 worth of Bitcoin like immediately so that they can start playing with it. But you actually can't do that.
But that didn't happen this cycle, right? Like this cycle is different. It's
Well,
like
I worry
this
that we
cycle went
I
up to
worry that
100K with barely any on-chain activity.
yeah, that's a big concern of mine. I'm actually worried that the opportunity to actually cause a chain reaction of adoption is maybe we missed the window of opportunity over the last 15 years, and now people have decided that they don't have an open mind to this Bitcoin thing anymore, and it's just a weird thing that governments and corporations do, and it's not for them.
Maybe, or they're banking on Bitcoin going up again, right? And instead of like, spending Bitcoin, they're just buying it on exchanges and it never moves from these exchanges. That seems to me like what all my friends and family are doing.
People
Yeah,
have
for sure.
always been doing that. They will continue to do that, I think.
I think like what I'm calling out here is it seems like Lightning's failures aren't really Lightning's failures, but rather like the concept of self-custody in Bitcoin's failures, if not even Bitcoin's failures to attract more retail this way, right? Which we don't have insight into. The difference between retail buyers and institutional buyers. I think like self-custody as a whole, I don't want to say it's failed because that sucks quite a lot, but it certainly is on the back foot, right? With this recent wave of like, industry news that we've been seeing. Self-custody is not winning. But that's not a Lightning problem, right?
I think it's, well, part of it is that Lightning makes it so much easier. It's so much more enticing to trick people into going the custodial Lightning route. So Lightning actually competes with the self-custody and makes it relatively look more difficult than it would normally be if we had never invented the Lightning Network and we could just tell people, this is what you have to do. You have to run this node, or you use Electrum, and whatever, Electrum will turn on and sync in 2 minutes. If we did that, then, but instead everyone's pushing the Lightning Network. So actually the Lightning Network is, not only does it not work, but it is like a virus that is like a zombie virus that people get flipped to the other side. They leave really the Bitcoin team because Lightning is aligned with not having self-custody. When you shill the Lightning Network, you're really shilling people not using Bitcoin. And so we have this parasite inside of the Bitcoin community that's robbing it of its blood, robbing it of its energy and its, brand, and it's what would normally be the steps that we would need to take to make Bitcoin a success. This is kind of like the Novocaine that just papers all this over and says, well, just go on Oster and zap someone, and then people have no idea. This also makes it less likely that people be interested in taking a real engineer. It's kind of like if you had, let me use a different metaphor. Well, let's stick with the Theranos metaphor. Like, let's say you're really interested in blood testing from a young age, and this is an obsession of yours. You're like 12 or 13 years old, and you read all these books about blood, and you're a really weird guy or girl or whatever, and you're so excited, and you hear about this company Theranos, and you're so inspired. And then you want to, change the blood. Well, what are you going to do as you start to get older and you need like an internship, or everyone's going to tell you to work for Theranos in that world. And then you're going to show up to Theranos and you're going to realize that it's all fake. And it would be much better off for the world much better off for the blood testing world if Theranos didn't exist at all. So does that make any sense? This whole self-custody thing is a chicken and egg problem to some extent. If more people were doing it, more people would talk about the problems, more people would solve the problems. The whole thing would be a flywheel of success. Instead, it's going the other way. More people are in denial about the problems in Lightning. More people are shilling fake Lightning that's not real. And more people are driving away. Any smart person who actually investigates the facts will be driven away by this reality. So that's very unfortunate, I think.
I don't think I really understood. I don't think I understood. You said a couple different things that seemed like they conflict. One thing in particular you said is Lightning tricks folks into like custodial solutions, right? And then later you said people who get into like the Lightning space as engineers or whatever, they dig into it and find out it's fake. Are you talking about how most Lightning usage really is like a custodial setup instead of like a non-custodial setup, or most Lightning usage doesn't actually happen? Is that what you're trying to say? I don't think I
Yes.
understood fully.
Well, I was in 2019, but this has happened many times since. But I was with a big group of people, and they were all so excited about a new Lightning wallet that came out, and they're sending each other 10 Satoshis or 4 Satoshis or 1 Satoshi, and all they can talk about is how amazing this is. And of course,
Sure.
the wallet is completely custodial, 0 Bitcoin transactions. You can just download the app, make an account, and receive 1 Satoshi. Now, I know that is not possible, because in order to join the Lightning Network, you need to open a channel with someone. You need a L1 transaction, the funding transaction. You need to wait for it to confirm. But none of these people know that. So this is the fake, this is the fake world that people are getting excited about. And now this is the thing that when Michael Saylor goes on CNBC and says this will be solved by Lightning and other layer 3 protocols and other whatever stuff that he's going to say, he is now a participant in this delusion. And this is what will be disappointing to the people who really want to scale Bitcoin. They'll think, well, actually, Bitcoin is just a fraud, because what gets what gets high on the totem pole is Lightning, which is fake. And so that little person, the new genius who's 13, 14, 15, will think, first of all, I got to get out of here because these people are all crazy. And then they're going to think, I'm going to have to, my job now is going to be even more difficult, because if you want to do your blood testing company, not only do you have to do well on your own, but now you've got to compete with Theranos, which is tricking people. So it's clear to me that the overall effect of the Lightning Network has been to make Bitcoin less likely to succeed. That is still the case today. This has been the case for a very long time. The fact that people think like we added Bitcoin to an exchange, or that some people believe that they're using Lightning, in many cases a false belief, that all that is just making the whole situation worse, in my view.
Okay. How do you feel about the increased like usage from Cash App with Lightning?
I haven't.
What do you make of that?
I've reached such a point that I have to confess, to the audience that I'm not familiar with that. But you can imagine why, hopefully, because remember, I wrote like my Lightning limitations post back in like February, April 2022. So this is like me saying that the blood machine doesn't really work. And so, in the ensuing years, it's possible that one of two things have happened. One is that more people have been tricked and that they just don't realize that they've been tricked, or that maybe everyone got their act together, in which case, I don't know why the Custodial zaps are showing up with a Lightning icon, and why they're referred to as zaps, which would mislead people into thinking that they're Lightning transactions. But it's possible that this Cash App data is unbelievably bullish for Lightning. It's also possible that both numbers are very small. So 20% is just a small percent of a small number. But I don't actually know. I have to say, I throw myself at the mercy of the audience, because because this isn't what matters to me anymore. What matters to me is the Lightning Network going to stop lying to everyone? And the answer is probably no.
So I really want to attack the lying thing for just a second, because Lightning has so many flaws. Don't get me wrong. Lightning has been caught up in so much like bullshit at the regulatory level, right? And it's stuff that nobody knows about for some reason, and it's stuff that it like does stop up Lightning, and I would love to talk about it. But this comparison to Theranos, it like fundamentally breaks down in a couple different ways. But let's talk about one way in particular. The Theranos thing was a complete fraud, because fundamentally, like at an atomic level, there is not enough information in a drop of blood to be able to perform 1,000 different tests. That is like fundamentally that, like just
Yeah.
you can't sample that. That's just not how that works, right? And that was always going to be a failure with Theranos. With the Lightning Network, it's a very different problem, but fundamentally, this concept of using HTLCs and this like crazy Mexican standoff way to ensure unilateral exit where people can route transactions through each other is fucking crazy and wild, and it does work, right? Like the crazy part.
I think it's actually a good analogy to the blood density thing, actually.
Let's talk about the
HTLC expands for the intermediate nodes that need to use the HTLC to route. If you have A, B, and C, the whole point of the Lightning Network was something like a 6 degrees of separation type of a thing, where maybe you don't know your counterparty, but you guys both know someone along the route. These people use the HTLCs to route. This was the big invention. I'm glad you brought up HTLCs, because HTLCs are the big thing that makes it the Lightning Network versus just the bidirectional payment channels that pre-existed the Lightning Network. So It's annoying when people say bidirectional channel. But anyways, the HTLC expands the size of the transaction by a certain amount.
Yeah.
So if you want to if the people on other parts of the route try to scam you, the HTLC provides you recourse. But the problem is the HTLC requires like a couple setup bytes. It requires a 32-byte hash. Then you have to spend it. You have to spend that output later. So you have to have the pre-image. You have to have selecting it. There's 8 bytes for the value. So just to get this money back into your account, it consumes a certain number of bytes. And a long time ago, in 2022, when I wrote my Lightning limitations post, I have a whole section on the HTLCs. I don't remember the exact number, but it's something like at least 60 or 70 bytes. And it's possible to shrink a regular L1 Bitcoin transaction to something like, theoretically, I think you could get it down to like 92 bytes or something. So actually, the reason I bring this up, why do I bring this up? This is the HTLCs are the additional ink you would need to write to the blockchain. So the fee
In the
that you have
failure
to
case.
pay, yeah, in the failure case, the fee you have to pay is comparable to what you paid to do an L1 transaction anyway. So in a world where the L1 transaction, the fees are prohibitive for L1 transaction, they also are prohibitive for HTLC. So you really, if
But
the L1 fee
but
rate is
that's
a
a
$5
failure case
per
though.
transaction, you can't use the HTLCs to do a $5 transaction.
What if I did 500 transactions over the lifespan of that channel? Would it not be worth it
I'm
then?
saying you can't do a single. You cannot safely route a single payment that is if the current fee rate is like $5 per L1 transaction.
Sure.
This is the rate that just comes from the usage. If it costs $5 to make an L1 transaction, you basically can't route safely in HTLC that's less than $5. So this is a fundamental problem with the HTLCs.
Yes, I can. It'll cost me my whole channel for sure, but if someone tries to rip me off, right, or the channel
If someone
fails,
tries to rip you off, you'll be better off not having the HTLC because you could take them to court, so to speak. You drop it
yeah.
to L1. You will get the $4 payment or
Mhm.
whatever it is out of the HTLC. But my point is, by the time you're done with all that, it will have cost you $5 worth of L1 transaction fees. So you'd actually be better off not enforcing the HTLC. You would be better off not enforcing the HTLC. But then you see, without the HTLCs, the whole Lightning Network idea is kind of just a big smoke and mirrors, which is exactly what it is.
Wait, but the HTLC thing still stands, right? Like, so you're talking about like if a single small HTLC fails, right? And then let's say like it's 1 cent, and the cost for me to like go remediate this is $5. Fine, sure, totally.
Right.
But there's a
Better off
cost.
not doing it.
Yeah, but there's like
Right.
if it's a channel set up by them, they're the one paying that cost, not me, right? Because they set up the initial amount or whatever that they set aside in the multi-sig. That's like how this whole
Yeah,
thing
you have
works. So I don't even pay the cost.
the intermediate person is routing from, let's say you have A, B, C, D, and you're B or something. What
Yeah.
you're saying is you're taking the HTLC from, like, Alice wants to pay Dave or however it is, and
Mhm.
Dave, what Dave is going to have one. I don't remember which one is going to. Someone's going to create. Someone creates R and someone creates H, and then the
Sure.
B and C nodes. What they will do is C will take their money from B, and they'll
Mhm.
say, "I have this money coming in from you, which is 1 cent on this HTLC. And if it times out, then we'll just, but once we have the HTLC, we'll then update our channel balance and delete the HTLC. So the HTLC is only for temporarily during the period when they have not yet updated to the final amounts, because you don't want to just front someone the money. I don't know if this is the best way of explaining this, but basically, let's say, okay, Alice has. Are we really going to do this with actual numbers? Maybe we should. I don't know if it will be helpful or confusing to people. But
We
like,
should like if you think this is a real like flaw, honestly, I think you should take this to the mailing list because people should talk about it, know about it. But I don't think this is a flaw in the slightest. Like, because from my point of view, there isn't too much of a reason for someone to do this. And if they were to do this, then other nodes would ban them, which probably happens because this is just like gross, like, abusive channels. And then like lastly, if this does somehow escape, like how nodes police each other, right? And if this somehow does result in an actual griefing attack that is like costless for the attacker, then why aren't we seeing this actually happen online, right?
well, I think there are many griefing attacks. That's the issue, is that ultimately the Lightning Network actually does rely on who you have chosen to open a channel with. So at the end of the day, it does kind of
Yeah.
rely on brand and reputation. And that's part of why it makes it not work. It's not like a cypherpunk anonymous crypto thing. It is very much a kind of a trusted brand type of a thing.
I think I just noticed the goalpost moving
It's
a little
not,
bit.
though. You attack. It's just that the HTLC part doesn't work. So it's why pretend that we're using HTLCs.
But it clearly works. Like it clearly
think-
works.
There's this thing called the dust limit in Lightning. When you
Yeah.
route a train,
It's a Bitcoin thing. but
yeah, and then when they do that, in that case, they do not use the HTLC for exactly the reason that I mentioned. So, but then they still call that Lightning. But in my opinion, it's now we're watering it all down. But this is an official part of the.
What are you referring to?
If you route a payment that is beneath the Lightning
dust
dust
limit?
limit, which is different
No,
than
like-
the Bitcoin L1 dust limit. If you
You
and
still
it
have
will
to
not
update
use.
the
There
configuration.
will be an HTLC. There will be no hash. There will be no time lock. There will be no additional output. So there is no HTLC.
If
When you
it's
send one
below the dust limit,
send one
that's not
stat
true
over
though.
the Lightning Network, you think someone makes an HTLC? They do not.
Yes, it's called updating the commitment. That's exactly what happens.
There is
Quite
no
literally. Just to give
HTLC.
the dust limit just a consensus thing, dog. Like that's not a Bitcoin thing, right? Like you can get a transaction mined below the dust limit. It's totally
I'm not
fine.
talking about the L1 dust limit. I'm talking about the Lightning dust limit. You can get on the L1. You can have 0 value output committed.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, you can send a single Satoshi over the Lightning Network, and that'll be
I know.
like that'll do an update.
I agree that it will look like that's what happened, but there was no HTLC. So that's just part of my own view of the sort of delusion.
When you say HTLC, are you referring to all the metadata that is actually communicated back and forth in the round trip communication?
I'm
Or
talking
are
B
you
and C have a transaction that spends. They have a 2 of 2. The channel between B and C is a 2 of 2 multisig output on L1, right? So let's say
yeah.
maybe they each have 5 Bitcoin in there. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's just like I just for 1 second real quick, because
Okay.
like the high level explanation, and I'm sure you know this, right? But the high level explanations of like how things work fundamentally are very different than how things actually work in the implementation, right? Because like we're talking about the actually like communicating bits of information to each other, things happen at specific times, and HTLC is not actually communicated, right? That's not something that's actually going between two peers. It's just specific little bits of information that allow each peer to create the HTLC if they needed to. Just so the listeners and everyone kind of know this, right? So like when I say update commitment, I'm referring to a specific message that's sent between like B and C, right? And this also might
Yes.
be a little too deep in the weeds here for like listeners, and so happy to like kind of move on. But want to, and
Yeah.
I do push back that like one Satoshi does result in an update commitment message, which
What
would be
would
the
normally
communication.
happen is they each have 5 BTC, B and C, and then if A wants to pay D, 1 Satoshi, then A and B have a transaction where they update there. Let's just assume that works perfectly for some reason. B and C, they're going to take some steps where they make B and C will say something like, I will pay 5 back to my own account, 5 to your key, and I will pay. They'll change the 5 to 4.99999, and then they'll have 1 Satoshi go to this HTLC that will allow them to claim the 1 Satoshi from Alice in the event that C goes AWOL. Now, my point is that is totally pointless for them to do, because this third output would use more L1 space if you actually had to broadcast it. So you would regret ever having it in the first place. You would prefer not to have it. So you would just rather do something else, either wait for Alice to just give you the 1 Satoshi, or front the 1 Satoshi from B to C without any recourse going to the blockchain, because you don't have any, because it's not worth it to go to the blockchain for 1 Satoshi when it is going to increase the size of all the stuff that you have to write on L1 to get your purchasing power back by, whatever that was. I don't remember the exact number. It was like 75, 76 bytes or something.
Sure. So are you saying that this specific end scenario in this specific edge case that results in a suboptimal like cost to you is a reason why Lightning is a failure? Is
It
that
is
what you're
not the
saying?
number one reason. The number one reason is the onboarding bytes. But this is a reason that says if the HTLCs will not work in an environment of high fees, but yet people say the response to high fees is the Lightning Network. So that is a core contradiction.
But it does work in high fee situations. Remember, this is a very specific, like what if it's a payment that's a large payment? Like, is this not all?
Yeah, in
Like
that case, it would work better. But you see,
it
the
works
thing is,
better. What if it's many payments of large payment? Like what I'm
here's
saying
the
is
thing,
this
though,
is
is
like
the
a
large
very
payment,
specific end case.
the large
Like,
payments, though, are more
let's
difficult
okay,
to route. So they
let's talk
fail
about an
for a
actual
completely
failure
different
case.
reason.
Let's talk about an actual failure case in Lightning, right? Here's something that
Okay.
Lightning's actually fucking trash at, right? And this is something that Carlo's working on over at like Chain Code, and it's channel jamming, right? Like right now, if you have a Lightning node, you open yourself up to the possible of a griefing attack because there are certain resources that like can be constrained, which is a number of HTLCs that you can fit in a given channel at a given moment, right? That's a real problem with Lightning right now, and it's definitely a protocol limits, like currently, right? And I don't know what Carla's approach here is, and I assume that she's got a great one. But that's a real issue here. Like maybe we should talk about that and how
We
if we
can,
have a
but it's kind of like not worth it, though, because there are so many fundamental problems. Any single fundamental problem will kill the
but
project. You know what I mean?
We
So, like,
haven't talked of a single fundamental problem. You brought up an edge case of a specific failure case while ignoring all of the possible
it's not an edge case, sir. It is. I said whenever you want to pay below the L1 fee amount, that is potentially very high, and it's not a theoretical thing. During the ordinals phenomenon, the L1 fee rate spiked, and all of the legit Lightning channels like had to close or experience some kind of disruption. This is what pushed people further towards custodial Lightning. And this is also what pushed a lot of the Lightning people to give up on Lightning and switch to other stuff, ARC, Fedimint, whatever, because
Okay.
they're like, this was started Bitcoin season 2, which is like, instead of, we're no longer just going to run the same playbook from 2015, which is just Bitcoin plus Lightning. We're going to do ZK rollups and all this other stuff. So
Okay.
none of that, I don't agree with any of that you said. And I think it is
what I said.
yet another problem with Lightning is that it is this endless make work program for developers so they can collect the salary forever to fix the next tiny little screw. The whole thing is not worth it because we have to complete the whole circuit of getting to 8 billion people. And we don't want an endless.
So there's more work to be done. We have to get 8 billion people, but it's also a make work project. I do want to talk about that for a second because that didn't make sense to me. But let me amend what I said because I have to be pedantic, right? Which is fair. In the specific case where a transaction that I want to send might be lower than the on-chain fee that is currently the current cost, which by the way, it doesn't really matter what the current on-chain fee scenario is. It's more about like how much I set aside, like in the channel to begin with, which is a problem in Lightning we should talk about, right? That is an issue. It is partially solved with ephemeral anchors, but like it will be just costly in general during any of these like exit situations, right? That's just generally a problem with Lightning, and we've had like make
yet another different problem. But
yeah, I'm so happy to talk about the problems. You know, let's talk about them. That those are valid issues to me. But in this specific scenario, yes, it is suboptimal. It's you don't lose money, but it's suboptimal to try and like do a justice transaction, right, for your sub transaction, sub fee thing.
Exactly.
However, the cost of that justice transaction needs to be amortized over the course of the lifespan of that channel. If I've had that channel for 5 years and it's routed thousands and thousands of transactions, think of all the fees I've saved, right? Yes, this Justice TX cost me $5 this time, but like, what about all the fees I saved? Like, why are we ignoring that?
Disagree. I think what you would actually, the past is the past. So this is like the sunk cost fallacy. What you actually want to do is compare, do I want to bother keeping the Lightning channel open for how much future use do I? So you would amortize it on all the future use. But if you think you're going to get scammed on the very next transaction, why wouldn't you get scammed on the very next 10 transactions in a row? Why wouldn't you get scammed on all of them? And why wouldn't you just say, I'm just going to close, I'm going to cut my losses and close immediately? So I kind of almost would flip that around. If you know that somehow being able to broadcast to L1 would give you magical protection for 2 years, then I would agree, but it does not. You don't know. You have to make your decision today on the very next, the transaction you see right now. If you don't even want to have the HTLC, it would be a bug if they implemented the HTLC, which I think fortunately they have not. It makes no difference to me either way. It's just like one mistake or another. So it doesn't even make any difference. It's just, this is fundamental to the design of the HTLC, that it requires L1 bytes in order to work. And the L1 transactions are actually pretty small. But this is not even a big, would you want to talk about the onboarding? That's my number one thing.
Let's talk about the onboarding. Okay. So like, I'm happy to talk about what I think is the biggest issue in Lightning, which is not enough people support it. That's like, to me, the biggest problem, right? Like number one, right? What are your thoughts on why people don't support Lightning?
I think it doesn't work, and they can tell that it's badly designed and that it requires liveness. It requires people to like connect to you and know your IP address. I know they don't literally need to, but in practice, it requires like a highly active connection. You need to sign money in order to receive. I think the user experience is bad because you have a hot wallet. You must sign to receive money. When you compare it to the way Bitcoin works, you can just post the address and then you can have your computer be off and you can go on vacation and people can be sending you money. And it's very secure. It's very, it's cold storage like by default. So I think these are reasons. And also in practice, it's pretty fast. Bitcoin is actually pretty fast. It is not instant. Whenever I send Bitcoin, I always find the blocks are so slower than average.
10 minutes, yeah. It ain't enough. It's not instantaneous. Like, yeah, the 10 minutes in Bitcoin suck. Like the thing is, most people don't even realize that their transactions take 3 days to 90 days to settle in fiat land, but like
Right.
it
That's
looks like
true.
it settles, you know?
Right.
Okay, fair enough. What about the companies that are super bullish on anything Bitcoin, right? Like
Yeah.
Swan, for example. Swan's a super bullish company. You'd assume that they'd implement Lightning. Why haven't they? And they've got like
Well,
smart
I think
engineers over there. So
Swan, I think that Corey is like a sociopath liar. I've seen him lie many times about things for which it doesn't even make any sense why you would lie about them, and they would be easily caught and etc. So I don't know what Swan is doing. I know that Swan has some kind of beef with all kinds of people who are just funny and just don't take themselves too seriously, which would include Eric and Udi and John Seth and all these other people that I like. So I just assume that Swan is just like a deranged, insane place. And I don't know why they would do or not do any irrational or irrational thing is, it's beyond my skill to perceive. I have absolutely no idea why they would or would not implement Lightning or anything else.
okay, fair enough. Like personalities aside, right? Like personalities aside, I know exactly why Swan didn't implement Lightning, right? And they really wanted to. They really, really wanted to. See, in the US, and I was also at Voltage as well, so I like help onboard tons and tons of people to Lightning. In the US, in order for you to be in the flow of funds in any way, shape, or form, you've got to be regulated, right? Like most people who have a Bitcoin node, they they probably shouldn't be posting Bitcoin transactions by themselves, but the SEC and all these state empty banking divisions haven't gone rounding people up yet, so it's probably fine. But the way that the rules are written right now, if you interact with money, if you're in the flow of funds of money, you got to be regulated. Being regulated is a BFD. Oh my God, right? Our company is getting regulated
Right.
right now, and it's a huge problem, right? It really is.
I
But like
believe it.
if you interact with Lightning, that's a lot easier for you to get on the regulator's radar, right? It's not the worst thing in the world, but it is. And typically most of the like folks who want to integrate Lightning, they probably have like some level of exchange functionality, right? Swan is an exchange, kind of, but they're not regulated like an exchange. They rely on partners who are actually regulated like exchanges. The thing is, those partners, these custodians, they don't support Lightning. And because these custodians don't support Lightning, Swan can't support Lightning. That's the reason why Swan couldn't support them. Okay, fine. Maybe Swan's a terrible company that you personally despise. I know lots of people don't feel super positively about them, right? But what about Fold? I mean, everyone loves Fold. Fold is pretty much the exact same way, like set up the exact same way. And many other companies in our space operate in the exact same way. Because here's the thing about these MTLs, about this licensing, it is very costly to go about. So unless you want to bankrupt your entire company, like raising $3 million, $10 million isn't enough to like get the MTLs for these for this kind of business use
Money
case.
transmitter license.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then on top of that, you have to have like banking relationships, and these compliance folks like love to keep people out. Like
Of course, it's a
it's a whole
monopolist
thing.
guild. It's corrupt, of course. That's
Yeah, like
part of
this
why
morning,
Bitcoin.
no, for real. This morning, we got our banking application rescinded from a big bank, right? Because we had asset. This is from their digital assets team because we had assets that were too risky for them.
Yeah.
We only support Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about?
I mean, it's often a pretext. It's often a lie, of course, also. They say
No, I mean,
there's an X that sounds nice, and really it's a completely different reason.
so all these companies in the space are hyper reliant on these custodians that have these relationships already. For a myriad of reasons, these custodians don't support Lightning. It's not because Lightning is bad. It's because these custodians are fucking falling apart. Like there's like I can do an entire episode on that, how that world is going, but they're falling apart and it's really bad.
But is this what you
And the
mean by
problem is,
adoption? Because what I'm talking about, the L1, I mean, you cannot physically join the Lightning Network without first acquiring some Bitcoin or opening a channel on L1 or doing some extremely fancy and convoluted thing where someone opens a channel for you in like a big batch or something. There's just not enough space to actually join the Lightning Network in the true non-custodial Lightning Network. It just, you cannot fit more than like 1% of the population of the Earth. In
let's
practice.
fit 1% in.
Yeah. Well, I
Let's
agree
do
that
that
1% is better than
first.
0%. I would agree with
Yeah.
that, but I do think that actually it's something where we are all going to want to be using the same thing in the end. And so if something maxes out at 1% and something else maxes out at 100%, then that second thing is what should get more attention than the first thing would be my
Maybe,
thought.
genuinely maybe. But listen, something I've learned in my like career in tech as a whole is, frankly, tech means nothing, right? It only gets you so far in terms of like how excited people get over it. After a certain point, you get to the moon through hype and marketing alone, right? Like that might be the cult that you're describing, because Lightning
Yeah.
is very much in the like hype and marketing phase, right? Where the tech is plateaued. Like tech is cool. It's not going to onboard like 8 million people or whatever this population is right now, you know, but it's going to onboard a significant amount. And we got to do a lot of things to get to where we need to go. But we're in the hype and marketing phase. Absolutely. That's not a bad thing. That's a necessity to get anywhere, right? Like that's just the truth of it. Right now, we're a custodian, we're a Bitcoin custodian, and we're going against behemoths that have literally billions of dollars in funding. And our edge, we don't need to get billions of dollars of funding. Our edge is purely just going to be hype and marketing, right? Our tech is great, it's phenomenal, but that's not even the focus of our company anymore. You know, we have good stuff, and I hope to like, you know, slip pills of self custody to people's food without them realizing. But like, they don't give a shit about self custody. Let's just be honest here. You know, they don't care. So my goal is just from a like hype standpoint. And so like I guess toward
I
that
hear what you're
point
saying.
here, like Lightning does well because of the cults, right? Like it seems like the folk that you're talking about are like the Noster Twitter people who scream loudly without understanding. Yeah, I call them the NGU people, right? But that's
Sure.
like linked in Bitcoin too. They're gonna take this stuff to the next level, and they're gonna keep the stuff from dying when it's when there's a bear. You know, so I am thankful to them. You know.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but it does sound in a way like I showed up to a lightning debate and I just heard my opponent say tech means nothing and everything is about hype. And that almost is almost like what I was hoping to convince the audience. So, I mean, I'm happy that we agree that the lightning tech does not work and that it is buoyed by irrational hype. But that's what I thought I was here to say.
Wait, well, what about all the things I pointed out about all your callouts and stuff? Like, what about all that stuff?
Which
Are we just gonna
call
glaze over
outs?
all that?
Which call outs do we want to talk about? I'll
All
talk
right,
about whatever call out you
let me
want.
jump in. Let me jump in for a sec. You guys are making my job easy. We've been going for 15 minutes. Let's pivot slightly. Custody is a big topic through this. I think I agree with Paul's argument that many people think they're using self-custodial Lightning and they're really using ruggable, potentially Lightning. That's true currently based on how much custodial Bitcoin is out there with Lightning. And I'm not super technical, but people talk about the hub and spoke model of Lightning a lot, and which brings in LSPs. So thinking forward to how we solve scaling Bitcoin through Lightning, how do we think about LSPs? Because they're currently mostly centralized entities. Is that a dangerous point of contention that we're giving so much power to a voltage? Can these things be decentralized over time? How do you guys see that point?
Well, I'm glad you asked about that because at first, back in 2015, 2016, I was all in favor of hub and spoke. And I thought it doesn't matter because you have hub and spoke, but there will be, there'll be like 1,000 hubs or something. And most importantly, anyone will be able to create a hub. And I thought we'd all be protected because I didn't understand the Lightning technology back then as well as I understand it now. I thought all of us are going to be protected by like HTLCs, we're going to be protected by our own cryptography. So we're always going to be able to get our money back. And so I thought it doesn't matter at all, hub and spoke. And I thought, let's make it hub and spoke all the way. Let's dial the efficiency, the economic efficiency, the technical efficiency, the physics efficiency. Let's dial it all the way up. Make whatever kind of crazy hub. We'll make like a ring, make like a galaxy of hubs, and then we'll all have spokes. And I was all for that. Now I think it is a slightly different situation where what has happened is people have kind of realized that the self-custody is too difficult. The HTLCs are not worth it. It's just better to just, what gives you more product market fit is just the custodial. So it's almost like a red herring at this point. It's like there is no hub and spoke. Everyone just has an account, whatever, at Blue Wallet or something. I hate to, I don't want to call anyone out or something, but I'm just saying that it's like, it doesn't work. The bigger issue is just that it doesn't work. So the hub and spoke doesn't make any difference. It's just the whole thing is an illusion to me. So it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, I am worried about the hub and spoke thing. There are pros to it, right? Because frankly, the hubs are always really well maintained, well capitalized nodes, and so there's a lot of upside to routing through them. I always call it the super highway of Lightning, right? To route through them. Of course, there are downsides with that. Yeah, it's not the greatest thing in the world, but also at the same time, the services that a lot of these like nodes provide are super dope. Like honestly, like C equals, I'm not sure if they're still around, but their services that they had were pretty awesome, and we could connect like all sorts of cool stuff with them. And plus, Green Wallet with Blockstream, their LSP is pretty dope, because I can basically have like a super lightweight like Lightning client connect to them, and I always thought that was super neat. Um, yeah, I'm not like it's just like a different pro and con setup in my opinion. So on the custodial side. Here's something that like I don't think people quite have like figured out just yet. I'm happy to like spill the beans to any other custodians out there who want to beat me to it. But like things like Spark and Arc and other like setups similar to this are actually really really cool because you could have like this custodial setup where there's no setup like necessary for the user. Like keys are just on their phone and it doesn't even really matter. Things are driven by a centralized entity, call it whatever you want, a Spark organizer or whatever they call it. But like, each person has all the information on their own device and they can unilaterally exit via Lightning whenever they'd like. I think that's a bee's knees, like yes, it's going through centralized like, hops, if you will, for incoming and outgoing, but it's certainly more centralized or more decentralized than a Postgres database. I think that's pretty neat.
I think that's you can respond, Paul, but I think this will be the last question. Then we can go
Right.
to closing thoughts. But
I think it's important. How can we get more self custody? And I think it's a chicken and egg problem, as I've said. So I do think, obviously, we want to ramp certain things up. And when that first person texts you and says, "Oh, you're into Bitcoin, the Bitcoin price is going up. I keep hearing more about Bitcoin every day," you want to be able to just like whatever, send them $5 worth of Bitcoin, and they're not going to sync a 700 gigabyte node, on day one. That's incredibly stupid. I'm not in favor of that. So we do need custodial ramp up, independent of whether or not Lightning survives or takes over is the number one thing. It makes no difference. If Lightning dies, we need some kind of ramping up of the commitment that people have. And, people are not going to like generate their own wallet by like rolling dice or shuffling cards, on day one. Although again, we want that option for we want that easy option for the whoever it is, the big important Lightning user or Bitcoin user or whoever, someone is fleeing, mainland China with all their money or something, or North Korea, and we need them. They want, they don't know who they can trust, so they want to be able. So we want that. However, I do think the way the chicken and egg problem works, like an example I bring up pretty often is that people have learned how to drive a car, for a while. And probably in the future, people won't have to learn how to drive a car, thanks to self-driving technology,
Waymos,
etc. Right, exactly, Uber or whatever. So just like the elevators operate themselves, in the past you had to have the elevator operator because people would, get like, cut in half or mangled by the crazy elevator. They wouldn't trust the elevator, so you had a full-time guy. Now what I'm getting at though is driving a car is actually really difficult, but the benefit was worth it. So, and we built all these systems, the driver's licenses and driver's education, the learner's permit. We built this huge thing because we were an ambitious society who wanted people to have the autonomy of the car. And, it wasn't easy, but it's not like the end of the world. Where there's a will, there's a way. So I think this whole custody thing, we could make the software so that it is a little bit easier for people to self-custody, and we could make the expectation higher and say, this is why you want to own your own Bitcoin, because you can't get rugged, whereas it's inevitable that people get rugged. So I don't see the world as like we show up on June 20, we wake up and there's a certain level of demand for self-custody. I don't see that as the situation. That is the situation, but I'm saying it's a function of what we do in the Bitcoin community. Our job is to make it really easy for people to run their own node and roll their own keys and have total control of their own money. And our job is to make it as easy as possible. And then that's what we should be hyping up. We should be hyping, hey, as Bitcoin, you can do 2 of 3 multisig. And what can you do at your local bank? The most you can do is put someone else like on the account and have like a 1 of 2 between like you and your spouse or something. That's pretty lame, but we have this 2 of 3. If you want to do a 2 of 3 escrow, you got to use like escrow.com, or you got to like hire lawyers, or you got to like make an LLC or something, you know? But Bitcoin, we can just do all that. We can do 5 of 7 multisig. We could do 3 of 9 or stuff like that. So we got to hype up. We got to make the technology easier to use, and that's what we have to hype up, is what makes Bitcoin different. We say, well, listen, you know what? On whatever it is, on Backpage or on Craigslist or whatever, or on various messaging apps, you can't text someone money because of this cabal that you mentioned before. It's monopolist guilds and their protectionist junk, anti-competitive moat that they built. But with Bitcoin, anyone, you can just send an email, or you can just send a text, or you can just send a QR code or whatever. Anyone can send money. There is no onboarding. There is complete privacy. So we want to shill that type of thing. That's what we want to do. And that's what we should do, is all I'm trying to say. So I don't think it's like not enough people out there want self-custody. It's like we are not making it easy for them. We should, but this is just one of the many mistakes we've been making over the last 10 years.
You said, how do we make like self-custody better? How do we get people excited about self-custody? How do we like bring it to the masses? I'll tell you exactly how we do it, right? As someone who's worked on getting Bitcoin in people's hands since 2015, and is like deep in the swamp right now, there's basically 2 problems. The first problem is moving the Bitcoin from the seller's hands, the custodian's hands, into the hands of the person who wants to get it. This is largely solved one way or another by, if not Lightning or Arc or a million other non-Bitcoin protocols, right? With someone out there solved that. It's relatively solved, right? That's not the problem we should really be worried about. The problem that we should really be worried about is, okay, we can instantaneously, almost for free, move the funds from point A to point B. Fine. But the issue is the fiat system does not allow for instantaneous transactions. Okay. What this means is, if you're in the middle, if you are giving someone Bitcoin and getting fiat money, you have the opportunity to get rug yourself because the other person issued a chargeback. This specific issue is why it's so difficult to get Bitcoin in the hands of people. Right? People genuinely, most folks have no idea how big of an issue this is, but those scammers and those folks who are always calling you, they are destroying this industry. And it's because of that specific part that makes like a complete instantaneous Apple Pay option really difficult to provide folks, even if you have all the licenses. So the first so the idea here, in order for us to get self-custody in the hands of everyone, is Bitcoin and stablecoins or whatever end up being such a good solution that it actually ends up pressuring fiat banking rail folks to implement a completely instantaneous depositing option. We have wires, we have FedNow. They cost a lot, $16 and $18 respectively. That's really expensive. Okay, but there are no chargebacks with those options. If we can push the fiat banking rails to get to a point where they have a sub $5 option, right, that is instantaneous, then we can get into a point where we can actually start offering like completely self-custody solutions with Apple Pay that are maybe a little bit subsidized for that $5, but entirely reasonable for people to get into. That world is what we want. We want Bitcoin to like pressure fiat rail banking, so that fiat rail banking ends up like, pushing Bitcoin even farther. And then more people get Bitcoin and their self-custody solutions, and it's easy. It doesn't matter to me if it's Bitcoin or Lightning. Honestly, I don't give a shit. Or Arc, I don't care. I want that end goal.
So do you think like a stable coins partly, I think, were invented to fill that type of a thing of like a fast fiat?
We'll see. I've got my own personal thoughts on stablecoins, right? But I can't deny the fact that they are like valuable for a lot of reasons that we can like kind of rely on them for this. Maybe stablecoins will become that like intermediary rail, right? In which case, phenomenal. But listen, I can't pay my rent in stablecoins just yet. And I certainly can't buy groceries with stablecoins. So we are not there yet. Right now we're in this weird phase of banks issuing all their individual stablecoins, which reminds me of like the Confederacy, the Articles of Confederation, where every bank had their own like, note. And I'm not excited to see how this turns out personally.
Okay, let's close on this question, because we covered a shit ton, and there's a bunch of topics around CTV upgrades. You mentioned Arc and Spark, which kind of speak Lightning. in 2025, with all that's going on now, all that we just covered, is Lightning worth investing in, or not? Let's start with you, Harsha.
And like as an investor, I think
No,
Lightning's at a
I mean,
pretty
more
Like
as like
investing
a
your time.
yeah, like
investing time.
as a group trying to push Bitcoin forward.
Yes. So like we support Lightning at Magnolia. Honestly, it wasn't difficult to, if I'm being completely real. Maybe it's because I've been working with it for so long, but it was just spinning up a node and just like, like having a couple of protocols and procedures set up in our compliance docs. It's not a difficult thing. If I really cared, I would like partner with Voltage. There's so much infrastructure for Lightning now that supporting it and investing time into it isn't difficult. So it's just low cost at this point. It's genuinely easier than Bitcoin, which is very funny to me for a lot of reasons. But yeah, I'd say, yeah, sure, invest in Lightning as a business, hang out, have fun. It's not going to solve any of your like real problems you're going to run into as a business in the Bitcoin world, but have fun with it.
What about you, Paul?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I am more of a pluralist though, but I do think we should try everything. So, but actually Lightning just gets so much disproportionate attention that it really shouldn't get. And the only way to accurately reflect that state of affairs is to try to emphasize people that they should pay less attention to it. And so that's my point of view.
Okay, so it's almost more like a ratio thing. From my view, there's definitely Lightning is weird because it's been going for so long. It works kind of depending on the use case, but people are like in two big camps. There's like it's gonna slowly die, and we're gonna be on rollups or some L2 thing, and you're gonna use a bridge, or it's the future. That's like the two poles, and they both fully believe that, which is wild.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of the people who have studied Lightning the most, like Barack or whatever, the guy who invented ARC, it crashed the Lightning Network twice. These are the people who say it will be something else. And then the people who think Lightning is the future is an anonymous Twitter account with no face and a fake name that joined in 2022. So, I
got
mean,
it. Okay.
you know.
Cool. Well, gentlemen, this has been great. Let's do quick closing thoughts. Anything you want to leave with, like a minute or two, Harsha? Feel free.
Closing thoughts, dude. I think Lightning's like still pretty cool to work on. I think people are doing some really cool stuff with it. I think we're at a point right now where it's not really tech based, right? I think a lot of the issues with Lightning are really just like bubbling down support for it for the folks who actually really need it. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to like bring this like Lightning banking integration, which by the way, no one does, not even Lightspark. Okay. Like to other folks so they can actually onboard folks with Lightning into Bitcoin. That's to me like the missing ingredient here, and we're going to try and solve it. We also support native Bitcoin too, and we've already had a significant amount of interest in our Lightning offering, even though we're pre-operational. So I'm pretty bullish.
All right, Paul.
I just think that, Lightning, there's way too many moving pieces, constantly need new genius developers to come up with a new solution to this, that, transaction pinning and et cetera, et cetera. It's just basically not worth it at this point. There are, better ideas out there, including but not limited to my own drive chain idea. But really, regardless of what happens with that, I think overall, this was something that was a response to the large block argument in the block size war. And it became a kind of political slogan, and it became irrational. And it has built up a giant cult of people who are willing to defend it, who don't really understand what it is. And meanwhile, the march of science has been proceeding in the background, and people should pay less attention to Lightning and be more open-minded about other things, which there are very many. I think that is what people should do. So that's my point of view.
All right. I think we can close it there. People in the comments, if you're part of the cult, comment. If you're not, comment.
We won't be able to stop them. Yeah, the cult people will be out in droves.
Yeah, hopefully this was helpful for people. I definitely thought we stayed on track pretty well, and this is super interesting. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming on and debating Lightning.
Yeah, this was fun. I had fun. So
Thanks for having us. Yeah, this is a good time.
All right.